Welcome online and also here to this exciting session, Real-World Experiences Mobilizing Alternative Funding for African rainfed farmers. It's organized by Solidaridad, also by the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, SAMCOM, and by CIVI. Much of the work from CIVI in the TIARA has been a long time prior, from before me getting involved. So I have to mention also the work of the now closed Africa Regional Center from CIVI, many dear colleagues, consultants and collaboration partners there. My name is Stefan Heilscher from CIVI, and just quickly the agenda for today's session. We will have an intro into mobilizing alternative funding for African rainfed farmers by Nonsin Como from Solidaridad. Then we will hear Gerald Mundova from SAMCOM on the ministerial declaration enhancing investments. And then lastly, we will hear my colleague Maganiso Kruger talking about TIARA and the triple bottom line approach. Afterwards, we'll have a panel discussion, and then we have some audience involvement. So I would like to get online my colleague Nonsin Como from Solidaridad. I hope she is already logged in. Let's see.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, sir. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me.
A big greeting to you all.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I can't really see everybody that's in attendance there, but just to say good morning to everybody, and I hope everybody is well. I think as Stefan has indicated, my name is Nonsin Como, and I'm from an organization called Solidaridad. So we are a civil society organization, and we mainly work or focus within the agriculture sector. I think for a lot of the sessions that have taken place within this particular week, for World Water Week, I think we've heard a lot of the importance of water within different sectors. But I think one of the sectors that we really want to emphasize in this particular session is the agriculture sector. I think not only because of its importance in terms of the employment opportunities for different communities within the developing space, but also because of some of the impacts of or some of the repercussions of climate change that it's had to sort of face over the years. I think it's important for food security as well. Looking at how that has changed the food security system or the food safety system, it really becomes important for us to address these particular challenges. So what we've done is we've put together different organizations and different panelists who are going to speak to us about how they are addressing some of the challenges within the agriculture space that are mainly focused on water-related issues. I think because of the over-reliance of rain-fed agriculture for a lot of our smallholder farmers within the African or the developing world space, there needs to be, what sort of solutions can we then implement to be able to adapt to these particular changes? So what we've done is we then want to showcase some of these practical examples, and I think it then speaks to the name of the session, looking at the real world cases, but also how have these managed to leverage additional sources of finance, alternative sources of finance. Because I think for us to implement, it's important that we have finance to implement, but also how are we then crowding in additional funding to be able to scale up some of these initiatives. So I think without any further ado, I'm then going to hand it over back to Stefan, and he's going to then take us through the program. But my job was just to lay the foundation in terms of what to look forward to during this particular session.
Thank you so much. So next one up, I invite Joel Mundova from SAMCOM to talk about the ministerial declaration by SAMCOM. Welcome, Gerald.
Thanks a lot, Stefan. I'm actually impressed that you said my last name very well. It's quite a tongue twister to many. So I work for the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, mandated by the 8 riparian states of the Zambezi Watercourse to manage the water resources of the Zambezi Basin. Why rain-fed agriculture, some might wonder. Given the conditions that we have in the basin, about 47 million people call the Zambezi home. and the population is expected to grow to 51 million by 2031. Currently, 80% of our farmers in the basin, they rely on rain-fed agriculture. In as much as ideally, it would be good to put in place irrigation systems, but it takes quite a great deal of money to do that. And in addition to that, not all arable land is suitable for irrigation development. So what do? We need to make sure that we reinforce rain-fed agriculture and equip our farmers with the right knowledge and tools for them to produce and enhance their livelihoods. So the ministers responsible for water in the Zambezi Watercourse, they form what is known as the Council of Ministers, which is the highest decision-making body in the Commission. So they made a declaration on rain-fed agriculture, having seen the need for us to invest in our farmers and make sure that they are better equipped to produce more and deal with climate change. They acknowledged that there's need for us to channel money towards enhancing rain-fed agriculture. There are downstream benefits in doing that. For example, enhanced catchment management, the protection of water sources, and other benefits. Because of, at the end of the day, policies do matter, and there's need for us to have political will in order to get things going. So that's why the ministers were also involved through issuing this statement. There's need for our farmers to be supported. So in order for us to do that, it requires a great deal of resources. So the ministers saying so, the ministers issuing this statement shows the backing of the governments in the Zambezi Basin towards rain-fed agriculture. I think in a nutshell, Stephen, I will conclude. I know that in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done, I think we will hear more about the success stories and what has been done. I think that will be of great interest to see. So I'll conclude. And
do you want to read up the statement, or is it enough to have it online here?
I was actually trying to do so. So the statement reads, in the statement, the Zambezi Water, the Zamcom Council members stated that they acknowledge that they are uniquely placed, as in the Zambezi Watercourse Commission is uniquely placed to channel finances to activities that promote and enhance rain-fed agriculture in parallel with long-term investments in irrigation. We are acknowledging the fact that there's need to invest in irrigation, but at the moment we do realize that people need to produce and eat. So investment in rain-fed agriculture needs to be made. The ministers also recognized the role played by smallholder farmers as Africa's frontline land and water managers, and how their actions can improve water resources management and protect investments in infrastructure. We've got large investments that were made in dams like Kariba, Kaburabasa. Very, very important to make sure that we protect that infrastructure from siltation, sedimentation, and other issues. Then the ministers understood that there are many unaddressed rain-fed agriculture financing opportunities in the Zambezi Watercourse, which can be accessed relatively rapidly. And then they also acknowledge that there's need to promote policies which support the attention of multiple channels to finance smallholder farmers to enhance their agriculture practices and actively contribute to scaling up rain-fed agriculture financing in the Zambezi Watercourse. The ZAMCOM, or the Zambezi Watercourse Commission Council of Ministers, are committed to extend resources to all work towards tracking deployment of rain-fed agriculture finances in order to improve return on investment. And they are willing, as in the Commission and its Council of Ministers, is willing to work with institutional and public financiers seeking to deploy climate finance in the Zambezi Watercourse, and they will welcome any opportunity to share experiences and acquire knowledge of successful business strategies for integrating rain-fed agriculture in country plans. This is very, very important. I think we need to explore opportunities and make sure that we take advantage of them. And they are willing, as in the ministers, are willing to promote water resources management, land conservation, rainwater harvesting, as the region is migrating to small and large-scale irrigation systems across the Zambezi region. So in other words, rainfed agriculture can be used as a buffer of some sort. As we migrate towards irrigation, we use rainfed agriculture for the time being to form a buffer so that we continuously provide food security to the communities that reside in the basin. So I think in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you very much, Gerald. I mean, it's very important that we see that there's the political will to change towards more and improved rainfed agriculture. Thank you. Then I ask onto stage my colleague Maganisu from the Stockholm Resilience Center and from CV.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can hear me properly.
So, Maganisu, you're a doctor and you have been involved lately in the CV's and the Beckman Foundation's and CEDA's TIARA project, transforming investments into rainfed agriculture in Africa. And you have a presentation on the triple bottom line approach. So, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Stefan. Just a quick introduction about myself. I'm Maganisu Kruganyasulu, and I'm a researcher, and I've been mostly focusing on understanding the interplay between water, climate, as well as how that impact farmers, both from large scale as well as at a grassroots level. And I've many years working with different farmers across Africa with different organizations as well. And today I want to talk a little bit more about the TIARA project, which is called Transforming Investment in Africa's Rainfed Agriculture. And this is being approached using what is called triple bottom line approach. And one of the key person who was supposed to be here today, she's been double booked. Anna could have been here with me also to talk about this part, but I'm going to present it. And later on, if you have other further questions, you can always reach out to both of us. All right. So the background is that, the background is that when you look at the current, rain-fed agriculture, or when you look at the food baskets across the global, you'd find that about 60% it comes from rain-fed agriculture. But on top of that, what's happening is that you also have this highly dependence of agricultural systems in Africa. Like 96% of it is rain-fed focused. And on top of that, when you look at the progression with the changing climate, you find that we see a lot of drop in yield production due to climate change, and this is just across the whole of the continent of Africa. But at the same time, we know how important rainfed is for food production, but at the same time, you'd also see that there's a huge investment gap in rainfed agriculture, or just in water-smart agriculture. And this is more evident when you see how the public investments mostly go into the irrigation more than it goes to rainfed. But we know for sure that it is the rainfed that feeds about more than 60% of the population. But why is it that there's this gap investment? So this is why the TIARA project came into being, sort of like, look, can we develop a business case that can sort of like support investment and pool resources to rainfed agriculture? And just as a premise, Anna and a colleague did research to just see how relevant is it when we intensify rain-fed agriculture. Can we have double ripple effects? And they did this experiment just across the three important big continents, like one which was one in the Central America, and the other one in India, and another one in Brazil, and also in Ethiopia. And what they found was that when you intensify rain-fed agriculture, there's a lot of aspects that come out from it. One is that they understood that the farmers are like the frontline managers of water resources, and this includes rain-fed, even the rain-fed systems. And on top of that, also what they found was that there are a lot of multiple benefits that come when there's been what I would call water-smart agriculture, because this is more enhancing water availability in soils. And these multiple benefits, we can sort of like compound them into how they benefit the planet as a whole. If there is, if we implement like this water smart agriculture, how do they benefit the planet? And on top of that, how does it also impact the people? And also, how does it impact the profits or the gains that come out from this? And these three components sort of like work in harmony with each other as a compounded approach. So then the TIARA project, I'll just give a quick brief where does TIARA project fit in all this discussion. So TIARA Zambezi Basin Water Sport project is sort of like fits in perfectly to provide these case studies or to provide these examples on how we can enhance rain-fed agriculture. And the project is targeting for 5 years, and it's more focusing on the hotspots that my colleague Gerard was just talking about, and the aim behind it is just can we build a case from it. And based on a study that that we did, what we found was that there are a lot of hotspots based on socioeconomic as well as water availability as well as the gradient. And there are like a lot of hotspots that we can sort of like target and implement these projects, and that can be invested in. Of course, for now, we're sort of like targeting in these three countries, Malawi, Zambia and Zimbabwe, and of course there is always a need and demand for more investments that can go into building these cases. And some of our key partners are coming from Zambia, Zimbabwe, as well as Malawi, and also have like other more institutional partners which are more coming in with like different expertise into this, like World Forestry, C4, Zamcom, and the others. And how do we assess, or how can we be able to show these impacts, or to show that rain-fed agriculture or smart water practices can impact this? So we implemented a triple bottom line, sort of like try and understand this scope, but we are all driven by the key question, which is, can we find finance? Why is it there's no finance even being poured enough as compared to irrigation? And this can sort of like feed into the investment strategies, and investment strategies can sort of like provide like a better general knowledge on how investment should channel, or how the capacity development should be developed, and also how like business cases can be developed from this. But to support these information or to support these processes, we need to have a better understanding of how does the planet work, and how does the different management processes sort of like feed into this, and how does it support the society, and also how does it impact on the profit margin, which is like the key driver when you look at financing in rain-fed agriculture. So, of course, the key point is to hit this sweet spot of having these three components, which is more like, can we combine all these and have the sweet spot, which is more the sustainable hotspot. So I'll give you like a little bit of brief about like what's the biophysical assessment, like what is the state of the land use. For instance, when you look at the Zambezi Basin, which is, of course, there are other countries, but I'm just targeted for now. I'm just looking at the Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. You'd find that there is a lot of course, land use, which is more agriculture and other aspects around it. And beyond that, when we assess like at African level to understand how is the water and agriculture as well as growing season impacted, what you'd see that when you assess at a modeling approach for across, let's say from 2010 to 2040, what will happen is that you see there's a shrinking in terms of the growing season. So this is like more length of growing season assessed based on availability of soil moisture. And this is more compounded when you look in the Sahel region as well as the key area that we are currently working in. And what these shrinking imply is that there'll be precedence of having maybe dry spells and the like. So this is where now rainwater management comes into as an important element to support these gaps. And beyond that, you'd also find that there is a high potential in yield production, because when you look at, for instance, just taking maize production, which is like one of the major crop that is produced in this area, you'd find that there's there's a huge gap even in this area, even across, like when you go to the West Africa, but also in the our target area, you'd find there is this maize gap. And when we going further into these water metrics, like for instance, when you look at how much water is used to produce a yield, and what you'd find is that the current status is that we have across the continent there's a high rain-fed water footprint, or water that is required to produce a gram of yield. And with climate change, there's a precedence that the demand will be even higher, so you need more water to produce the same quantity you produced in 2010. And this also goes across even when you implement even irrigation processes, that you'd still have the same impacts. So what does all this mean? So what this means is that when you have these repercussions, there's a need to bring in like different measures that are more water smart targeting. And this does not only bring benefits to increasing yield, but also brings other benefits that are beyond, like when we combine like rainwater as well as land management, then you'd find that they are all complementary in terms of like how they support the agronomic measures and how it also supports like different availability of soil moisture and other components. And just to add more, like when you assess like all these, the relevance of rainwater management, find that there are a lot of components that comes with it as benefit. Like there's control of soil erosion, improving water cycle, how different sources of rain, like from where they are coming from to where it's precipitating, and also how the soil nutrient is impacted. And there's also a component of building these resilient ecosystems. And so we have also the quality of water as well as quality of soil at the same time, and of course with the goal of attaining this sustainability. Beyond that, I think what we've been working right now with Anna is that we're trying to model to see what are the impact of these practices that are being done across the TIARA project, but flooding them all over the world, and see what are the impacts on both above ground and below ground carbon sequestration. So the soil carbon stocks are one of the key components that helps in helping us in terms of like how to control or mitigating the climate change. So what we're trying to do is to see if there's been a progression of years of doing these rainwater management processes, can we be able like to control the carbon emissions? So you'd see like there is a huge soil organic carbon impulse in those processes. So now going to the people component, and when we talk about people, there are a lot of aspects that we can incorporate. There's a lot of like the social capitals, and there's issues about rights, issues about governance, which I think I cannot dive in right now, but these are some of the key things that we look at, like human rights.
You have time if you, yes.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so looking at how these processes, when you bring different communities together to work together, it brings in this concept of like social integration, and as well as people having the rights and even availability of spreading like croplands. Because for instance, when you look in Africa, you find like most of smallholder farmers are like partitioned into maybe 1 acre type of approach of land farm size. They're like a lot of small farm sizes, as compared to when you're trying to implement irrigation, then you have to have like compounded communities, or you have to spread out to maybe sell the whole huge land so that you have a huge space of land. So there's a little bit of rights that comes with it, and also like knowledge co-production and sharing, and also like independent governance around it. And this corresponds to not only local rights, but also indigenous knowledge and indigenous rights so within these processes. And beyond that, there's also a component of like how does these community or the social capital processes sort of like spike up to enhance the supply chain. And supply chain is one of the key components when if an investor wants to invest into the rainfed agriculture, they want to understand like what is the supply chain, like what are the availability of the markets and the like. So this is like one of the key components that needs to be incorporated in this, and that's one part of also that we're assessing on people. And we have like right now like a framework that we've been trying to scale up, which looks both into socioeconomic assessments, and for it we sort of like divided it into different aspects. So first part that we're looking at is the primary assets, and within the primary assets there are a lot of other things that we can talk about, but I'll just sort of like summarize it into brief. So there's one component that looks into the rights that I talked about, and one is more like the financial component, and there's also another one which looks into like what are the social benefits and the natural assets that come with it, as well as the physical assets that are built around it. And beyond that, so the primary asset supports the structural assets, or the what I can call instrumental freedoms. And these instrumental freedoms are like, how much does it impact the political will, and how much does it impact the social facilities, as well as economic freedoms and protection, as well as the transparency that come with it. But the key element that has to be talked about is that these two aspects are sort of like driven by the agents, and agents in this case, it's us in the room, it's the farmers, and these are sort of like try to make them into action. And when you put them into action, then we have like what is called functionings. Like, so you have like a work, like an operating health system, an operating school, or an operating a market where farmers can sell and buy their products. And these bring about what is called the well-beings. Of course, these two elements will sort of like go back into a cycle to sort of like support the whole system. So this is like the framework that we are overlooking to assess the people component within the triple bottom line. Yeah, so I've talked about the planet and I've talked about the people. Now I'll talk a little bit about the profit. And for the profit, I think the closest we can get is how do we report return on investments. And on return on investments, I think most of it, we look at it in terms of costs. And beyond costs, we also look at it in terms of like what are the benefits that come with it. And what are these returns that come from like projects like TIARA, and even projects beyond that are more focusing on rainwater management. And I'll sort of like give also another overview in terms of like when we assess the production. Let's say when we take like major crops, like major cereals in Africa, what is the potential value of production? So most of these are modeling assessments. So you'd find that majority of the production are more focusing on this part of the presentation. So when you have the darker green, it's the amount, the potential of yield per hectare in dollar value. So you'd find that, of course, there is a potential in rain-fed cereals per yield. It even goes beyond to assess it from the cost that you can bear from production to even export, if the plan is to export it to the seaport, or even when you want to spread it across the continent, so that there is self-dependency within the continent. You find that there is a huge potential in terms of yield, but there's also a little bit of a cost that needs to be bear to it. So the cost, it will be a cost in terms that for buying and selling, and at the same time there's also benefit in terms of like increasing the value for rain-fed for the farmers. So I'll sort of like give one example of the practice that we have been working on with organizations in Zimbabwe, which is called FASHID, and they have a concept which is called Fumbuza, and normally it uses practices that are, you might look at them as they're simple. Oh, this is what has been happening over the course. Why is it that it's not scared? Like the use of manure and the use of like mashing and also the use of like beds and bedrocks, and you'd find that these are increasing even their production of yield. But now the question is like, why is it that there isn't that much investment that is sort of like targeted into these aspects? So these are some of the key things, but they show that it shows that these practices, no matter how small or how they look as obvious, is that you'd see with a small input in terms of like input of investment, there is a high yielding in comparison to conventional farming, and of course. There is, of course, a little bit higher cost in terms compared to convention, but these costs can always be overlapped by the returns from it. And also there's an impact in terms of the soil moisture conservation, that there is more improved soil moisture conservation, which is a key component when you're looking at soil organic carbon that can have other spillover effect on the climate adaptation component. Yeah, so the key thing that I'm sort of like to draw here is that there is a lot of untapped potential when you look at rainwater management, and this untapped potential is sort of like embedded within the limitations in maturity of the solutions. Like there's of course question marks about how mature is this. They've been practiced for so many years, but how can we bring them to light? So like these are really evident that they lead to high production and also all these spillover effect, impacts. And there's also a huge gap within the lack of knowledge acceptancy, and there's also a huge gap in terms of like the leadership that can drive these movements as well as impact these effectiveness. And there's also like this component of capital that can come into this effect. So projects like TIARA are really crucial in giving evidence or giving information in terms of like how these gaps can sort of like be impacted. Like for instance, this knowledge generation and implementing like different frameworks can sort of like feed into these components. And also you talk about leadership, and like projects like within the TIARA project can sort of like push towards the capacity building and also help farmers to build on this. And also goes beyond the capital component. So business cases that can be developed, projects like this are also really crucial. So what are the take-home messages? So the first take-home message is that, as I've said here, is that there is potential in rainwater management or in water smart agriculture, and this potential is not only just for the being cost effective, but it has also other multiple benefits beyond profits to nature and climate and also to the society. And the other thing is that there is a need to build a business case that can sort of like support these key assessments. And beyond that, I think we need more of these type of projects or these type of case studies like the Zambezi Basin waterway. All right. And yeah, please. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Maganiso. That was a very interesting presentation. I saw many taking pictures, but I'm sure we can somehow share your presentation and just reach out to someone, Sivi or to Maganiso directly, and we will share the presentation. Next up is our panel discussion, and to make, including the ones being online, complete, I also ask on stage Arlene Mitchell from MS Innovation Lab. Please, Mitchell.
Hello. My name is Arlene Mitchell, and please call me Mitchell. MS Innovation Lab is a company we started with my partner, Steve Rocco, about 15 years ago. We started it because we saw a need for business development and capital raising, primarily in agriculture in Africa, and I will say we started in East Africa. Currently, we're in South Africa, West Africa, and Iraq. We plan to be global because the need is global, but one step at a time. So we saw a need as well for smallholder investment. Now, smallholder investment I will speak about later, but because of that gap, funding smallholder farming, we started Regen Innovation. And Regen Innovation is a 501c3 based in New York. And I will speak more about that later. But I need to say that we also believe in the triple bottom line, planet, people, profit, not politics, which really will help investment. So thank you. I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Yes, now we have the panel complete. You have already answered my first question. As an introduction, I would like to ask, what is your interest and what is your expertise in attracting more investments into enhanced rainfed aquaculture? And there, first one up, also to present yourself and what you're working with. Please, Pami. Pamisai Botha, Regional Program Manager in Cotton at Solidaridad. Just in 2 or 3 sentences, what is your interest and what's your expertise when it comes to finding investments?
Thank you so much. So my name is Samizaya, as introduced. I'm based in Zambia. I work for Solidaridad. So currently I'm working on a project called Reclaim Sustainability, supporting the cotton sector. And I think our interest at Solidaridad is to see that the smallholder farmers that are working with are able to benefit from different value chains just beyond cotton. And best practices are what we're trying to promote to make sure that they benefit from that. So we look at the entire value chain where we look at the production and also look at access to markets and also access to finance, all the activities and support that the smallholder farmer needs. And I think this platform, we're looking at one essential support, one essential thing that farmers need, and that is access to water, and through that is rainfed. And most of the smallholder farmers, like it was already mentioned, they actually rely on rainfed for their production. So be able to share some of the work that we've been doing to just support these smallholder farmers to maximize their production and also to improve their livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nancy, anything you want to complete there from Solidar's side? How you are specialists and expertise in attracting financing?
Okay, thank you so much. So I think, as mentioned, my name is Nancy Nkomo, and I'm the Business Development Manager for Solidarity at Southern Africa. So it basically means that my role is looking at crowding in or resource mobilization. So a lot of the initiatives that Pamedzai will speak to, my role is really looking at who are some of the donors that can then assist us in both implementing as well as scaling up the initiatives.
Thank you. Then we also have on the online panel, we have Freddie Catlow, COO and co-founder of Planboo. So Freddie, just shortly, a few sentences. What makes you an expert, or what are you interested when it comes to attracting financing into enhanced rainfed agriculture?
Thanks, Stefan. Greetings to everybody. So Planboo, the company I represent, we're aiming to tackle climate change and global inequality through the sequestration of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere using something called biochar. Biochar is then applied to the soils where it increases the water holding capacity of soils. So whether it's irrigated or non-irrigated cropland, you can increase the water holding capacity. And we've been able to attract finance through the sale of something called a carbon removal credit to companies such as Spotify or Klarna, Swedish companies that are interested in reaching net zero. Biochar is a genuinely truly win-win solution. Not only does it tackle the overall macro problem of removing carbon to tackle climate change, but it also increases the resilience of that soil, whether it's in a drought-prone area, such as in Zambia, where we've been doing a project with Solidaridad. Through this approach, it's very measurable, it's very tangible. Smallholder farmers are grouped together and trained on the technology that we've developed so that they're able to quantify and produce their own biochar, which is then put into the soils. And we've seen in Zambia this last year already a 60 to 80% increase in the crop yield because this year they've experienced a drought. But where the biochar is being applied, you can see in the photograph on the top right-hand side, really 50% of the field, the cotton stalk or the cotton plant hasn't germinated. The seeds haven't germinated because of drought. However, where the biochar was applied, there's enough moisture there for the seeds to germinate and the crop to grow. We've been doing this for a few years now, and it's really seemed to be attracting some finance initially, really from the carbon removal aspect, but naturally it's providing this tangible benefit, which is increasing the resilience of soils that are affected by climate change.
Thank you very much, Freddie. So, Gerald, also, what's your expertise and what's the interest of SAMCOM in this? Just very quickly for the panel.
The primary interest is to make sure that our communities are self-sustainable. At the end of the day, these initiatives that we want to put in place, they have to serve the people. In the Zambezi, most of the investments that have been made are in large-scale hydropower infrastructure, the Cabora Bassas and the Caribas of this world. And, implementing initiatives like the ones that are being done through TIARA has downstream benefits on infrastructure like large dams, because it will help to curb siltation and preserve the environment. One of the major challenges we have is that when people don't have alternatives, they tend to primarily rely on the environment. So providing investment into rain-fed agriculture will, to some extent, make sure that we have those people get alternatives. So it lessens the pressure on the environment, helping to preserve and conserve it in the long run. So I think in a nutshell, that's it. Yeah. And as a commission, of course, we are looking at, we have a strategic plan that that covers the 2018 to 2040 planning horizon. So one of the key areas that we want to address through this plan is to make sure that we take care of the communities that we have in the basin. At the end of the day, they are the frontline soldiers in water resources management and also land preservation. So yeah, that's what we are working and driving towards. Yeah.
I see here on the picture some of the decision makers from SAMCOM when they were sort of talking and discussing through the ministerial declaration. Thank you. Yes, and then after your good presentation, just what drives you, what makes you an expert on enhanced rainfed agriculture, and what's your contribution that there will be more investments into it?
You're putting me on a spotlight. Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think it's a really important question that I think it would make justice. There are a lot of people in the room also who are working in this field that have been looking around. But I think one of the key things, like I come from research as well as on-ground implementation from my previous work life. But what I see mostly important is that we need to understand that these, when you're looking at these things, they are not just like linear, they are more dynamic in the sense that you have, like we're looking at different components, like for instance, the triple bottom line that I presented, you have like the people, you have the planet, and you have the profit. So all these are sort of like interlinked, but at the same time, they're also dynamic. But what I see the most is like one of the key elements that comes into play is that how do we show evidence that these practices are real, or these practices can yield benefits and can yield profits, so that if there's investment coming in, they will know that, okay, if we invest so much money, then we are expected like this is going to come out. So what I see is that there's still need to develop more data availability, more data, I'll put it like maybe into 3 components. So you have one, which is more what we call biophysical. So this is like understanding the earth systems, like the soil water, soil moisture, soil quality, soil health, and the component of rain, or the climate, availability of rain, which is sort of like feeds into soil moisture availability, and how these compact to support the yield production so that you can have good yield, but at the same time also yield that is healthy. And there's also a component within this that is more looking into what is called payment of ecosystem services, or like how are the benefits of this enhanced rainfed agriculture affect other ecosystems, and how those can sort of like build into the investment platform. Beyond the biophysical, there's a component of the finance part, or like the profit, or I would call like more the social part, like how can we show evidence that the enhanced rainfed agriculture supports like social systems, or support the social capital, and that becomes more critical and key. And I see the way forward is sort of like developing these advanced methods, and also encouraging like these collaboration between organizations and research institutions, so that we can have like either it's more climate information services, or providing like evidence in terms of like maybe models that can sort of like provide information on parts where it's really hard to understand by looking at observation data, or application of different observation data, like use of satellite, or use of Internet of Things, or like like all these key components. Yeah. So I think, and also part of understanding the return of investment, like how does the component like supply chain, how does the supply chain look like, and if is supply chain within the enhanced rainfed agriculture sort of like supporting supporting both the yield production for the farmers, as well as supporting the information that maybe investors are looking for. So I think there is a huge data gap that needs to be filled in, and of course it's not that it's impossible, it's possible, but all this just requires like a collaboration from all these different sectors to sort of like come together.
Thank you very much. So it's the scientific evidence that's needed for many things along the triple bottom line approach, along the value chain. A question to you, Pam. One of the benefits we were talking about is the along the rural value chain, the strengthening of creating rural jobs, especially for the youth. Can you tell us something more about that?
Thank you so much for the question. So I think I'm going to borrow some of the points that previous speaker was mentioning to say when you invest in infrastructure development to store water, especially when there's enough water that has been received in the region, issue to do with harvesting of water for ponds and reservoirs, you'll be able to actually have provided the community with excess water that they can use. So instead of just relying on rainfed agriculture, which is not done at a particular point, if you're able to harvest that water, you're able to create more opportunities for the women and also the youth to venture into other farming practices during the off-farming season, such as vegetable production and just other activities that can be done in utilizing the food. And I think one thing that can also be emphasized is that even as we do this in the time of the drought and this that is being faced now in the southern hemisphere, is that our rural farmers don't have access to information. So for them to be able to invest well in whatever they are doing, they need to invest in platforms or digital tools that can be able to supply or inform our farmers on what they need to do. Aspects of informing them on the right seeds to grow, the right seed varieties to grow, and also just information on the weather patterns that will make them aware to say, as you are doing this particular production, you'll be able to receive rains maybe in a particular time period. So such tools need to be supported to a smallholder farmers for them to make informed decisions. So for them also to be more sustainable, we have to look at building their capacity in financial management. So even as they're entering their production system, when they harvest for that particular farming season, how are they managing their finances for them to invest back and be able to grow and become more resilient? So there needs to be that kind of approach that can be tailor-made to the communities, making sure that the way also the youth are taking part in such opportunities. And last, we also need to look at market access. When they do this production of the different crops that they've grown during the farming season, do they have access to a market for them to sell their produce, which is very important because they'll be affected with the drought and also just make sure that they've produced well. By the end of the day, if they do not have access to markets, it means that they'll be hit very hard because their crops or whatever will be produced will not be sold, and in the end will not be able to have the right income that is needed to improve their livelihood. Yes, so I think we need to look at all those aspects for them to have a more sustainable production. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I talk about the investment, like to add to that?
We come to it after.
Okay.
Nancy, the question, we see many young people leaving the countryside for the cities. Can you, out of your experience, tell us more if in the areas where we see enhanced rainfed agriculture, if we see a change, if people believe more in staying in the area and having probably a better life staying there?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So I think, as you've rightfully indicated, in a lot of the areas where we work, you do find that there are, where there's lack of opportunities, the youth would then prefer maybe to move to the urban areas. So I think where we really need to look, or what we've been looking into, is creating the opportunities within the rural space for them to be able to be attracted. I think one of the things that we've also sort of looked in is one of the challenges, or some of the challenges that are then preventing them from participating within the agriculture space in the rural areas. And I think one of them is the access to land. So a lot of them don't have access to land under which they can then, participate in terms of agricultural production. And I just want to give an example of a project that we're implementing in South Africa. It's called the Social Employment Fund. And it's essentially looking at, so it sits under the Presidential Employment Stimulus, but it's looking at job creation in the agriculture space in instances where young people don't necessarily have access to land. So what that then does is we then pair these particular individuals with smallholder farmers that are looking to increase their production, but because of labor barriers, they're unable to then increase that production. So we come in to say, we've got these young people that are interested in agriculture. They don't have the land, but you are interested in increasing your production or intensifying your production within the space or land that you have. They then become employed by that particular farmer under this project. What we've then seen is then even after, because we're now sitting on the third phase of the project, some of the farmers then retain the smallholder farmers that are working on their land. So then it becomes a sort of a pull factor for them not to then go and seek alternative opportunities in the urban areas. So I think once we start to look at the issues as to why they are not getting involved within the agriculture space, and we come up with innovative ways to then, include them in that value chain, I think we've then seen a lot of it, it being a pull factor rather than a push factor away from the rural areas.
Thank you very much. My next question is to you, Freddie. When you integrate carbon into the value chain of crops, how do you do the accounting? And another question would be, is this also, beside for cotton, would that be also relevant for other food crops, for maize, for example?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, in Zambia, we're using both cotton stalk and maize stalk. So this is the waste that's left in the field after the harvesting of the cob has taken place. But really, any living biomass, any agricultural crop has sequestered carbon as it's grown through photosynthesis. So the physical biomass of any agricultural waste can be turned into a carbon asset through the form of biochar. How we go about monitoring and tracking, it's so vital. And this is where there's third-party independent standards, methodologies that have been developed, both in Finland, in the US, and in Switzerland. They've developed the methodologies and the scientific rigor that's required to measure and monetize the carbon assets. And then we deploy, proprietary IoT. So that goes out into the field to provide that independent source of information on the quality and the quantity of carbon that's being sequestered into the biochar, and then put out into the field. The farmers and the lead farmers are also given the tool and like a smartphone application, so a digital tool that they're also using to manage and monitor their biochar production within inside their cluster. So that's within inside a group of smallholder farmers. But yeah, this is independently validated by third parties who then go and visit the sites. They go and approve and check the operating practices that have been followed to provide absolute rigor. The carbon removal market requires this. If we're going to deploy up to $1 trillion a year into carbon removal, which is what's required and estimated by the IPCC, if we're going to tackle climate change, they want to know that there is legitimate practices and accounting procedures taking place. So that's what we're following. So the fact that you can combine this carbon removal methodology and asset to attract finance whilst creating a carbon sponge for the soil that's then enhancing the root structure, the water holding capacity of soils. Farmers are getting paid to do this. They're receiving they're producing their own biochar, so they're receiving an asset as well as a payment. There is it feels like a real win-win that brings these sort of two enhanced rainfed agriculture and climate change, tackling the macro problem. It really brings it together quite nicely in this methodology, in this solution, which is biochar. So yeah, if people are more interested in it and they want to follow in the footsteps of like leading tech companies that are investing in carbon removal, then yeah, please feel free to reach out, because there's ample projects. There's more projects right now in the world that need this support and need this investment so that they can scale. Like the technology is available, the solution is available. It just requires the finance to support it. And that's what we're working towards.
Thank you. a carbon sponge that you're creating, and huge companies are willing to pay for it. That sounds good. Do you see a saturation of it? What time spans do we talk about? Will this end after 5 years or 10 years? What's your experience there?
I think climate change is such a significantly large problem that it won't be solved in 5 years. I think 2050 is really the IPCC's like landmark milestone that we need to get to, and by 2050 we need to be removing 10 billion tons of carbon from the atmosphere per year if we're going to avoid that runaway climate change. At the moment, the entire world, I think in 2021, removed only 50,000 tons of carbon permanently. So that's 100 plus years of sequestration. Remove 50,000 tons. So we need to get to 10 billion. So there's a really long way to go. In terms of the tropics and the capacity for the tropical regions to draw down carbon using biochar, it's estimated that from the agricultural waste that's produced per year, be it from maize, cotton, rice husk, cacao, bamboo, that agricultural waste can sequester 2 billion tons per year. So that's 20% of the global target. Like, that's a tremendous amount of sequestration that can attract significant investment. It needs a significant investment to be able to achieve that. Carbon removal credits currently are trading between $120 and $230 per ton for a biochar carbon removal credit. You can see if we're trying to do 2 billion tons at $100 or $150 per ton, it gets into the hundreds of billions of dollars that can be injected into these projects. But it puts finance into regions and to individual farmers that are living on like less than $2 a day in some regions. So it's not only sequestering carbon, but it's increasing livelihoods, improving livelihoods, and it's increasing the water holding capacity and the resilience of soils that are being affected by climate change. So 5 years won't do it. I think it's really like a 30 plus year ambition and drive that's required.
Thank you. Very interesting, Freddie. Brings me to my next question to Mitchell. You said your main interest lies with that the investments, the money reaches the small-scale farmers, because that's of the greatest interest today. Any words on that, on the investments and on the challenges, but also on the solutions that are out there?
Challenges are not my thing, because we all know the challenges. But in order to address solutions, the challenges are really that the different sectors and the different organizations work together. And I really don't experience that so often. I feel that, everyone on this panel, everyone remotely, we're working to solve issues and problems for the community. The basic is the community. And we always believe that the community really dictates how things should go, how finance should be created, which is really just creating more investment. So I think that if more organizations work together, and you guys are doing due diligence for a potential investor, we need all of this to work. So I'll speak in not like vague terms, but the investment, who is the investor? So we're a private sector entity, but we also have a nonprofit. On the private sector side, I'll use an example. We have a client now in Mozambique, and they're a very large grower, producer, and packager, supply chain. I mean, they're massive. So we've also earmarked a group of smallholder farmers in the region, and we will separate that. And so with Regen Innovation, we'll use the smallholder farmer to be able to get donations, because let's face it, really, to regenerate soil and to do all of these climate resilient practices, trial seeds, everything that the farm needs to be more climate resilient is going to be done by a donor. An investor is, an investor. Who is this investor? It's not going to be the World Bank. It's not going to be like a private investor. So that requires donor funding. So we would go out to our donor base and then get the funding, and then give it directly to the smallholder.
And would that be an initial investment, so once they are over a certain threshold that they're sustainable, or would the funding be needed continuously, sort of on a yearly basis?
It's always continuous. I mean, I don't know a client in agriculture that had enough money invested that they needed no more funding. It's always, you know, it's very money, you know, it's like agriculture is very money intensive, let's just say. So I think that that's the one aspect to reach the smallholder farmers. So by working with other partners, we work with Kavuno on the ground, also in Mozambique, and they work directly with smallholder farmers. So through our client, we will get the funding needed to provide, you know, really an access so that the smallholder farmer can sell their crops to our client. So this is a model. Will it work? I honestly don't really know. Sometimes these projects work, and sometimes they just go on and on and on until you find the right funding. So I don't want to like paint a bleak picture, but the reality in my world anyway is that funding is very difficult to find, and you have to be extremely persistent, and you have to have a great network and rely on people that come to conferences, people that you meet, people that you literally knock down their door, you know, and you stay at it. And then finally, you know, finance occurs. But it's a long, hard road, and we rely on experts like everybody on the panel, on the screen. So, you know, I would welcome questions, but really, I'm always looking for solutions, and I'm always looking for creative solutions.
Thank you. That's also the theme of this year's Water Week, to create, to go across the boundaries that we have. We heard from Freddie that there are actually some solutions on investing where Spotify and others interested would be sort of financing. We heard also that we have the Leopold Bachmann Foundation funding and supporting. Gerald, when it comes to the work of SAMCOM, and you mentioned that there would be watershed benefits of for dams and downstream. Are there any funding schemes that you or SAMCOM is looking or investing? Would dam owners or managers, would they be interested in paying and compensating for less sedimentation? I tried to find the picture with the big erosion going on. Just mentioning, two of my colleagues from CB were in Ethiopia talking and visiting an area where there's also enhanced rainfed agriculture. And a week after they left, this terrible landslide happened. So it's not only about, there are other benefits of reducing sedimentation and soil erosion and landslides.
So yeah, thanks for the question, Steve. So it's important to take note of the fact that SAMCOM provides a platform for all these different stakeholders to come on board, not only the member states, but other players within the watershed who are interested in water. So yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to how we package the message. I mean, if we take into account an entity like the Zambezi River Authority that is responsible for managing the Kariba Dam, approaching an entity of that nature with a properly packaged message or a properly packaged intervention, I am sure 100% they will be interested in funding initiatives such as rain-fed agriculture. At the end of the day, when soil conservation is put in place, when everything is in order, they will benefit in the long run. I'm sure they will see the value in investing in rain-fed agriculture and smallholder farmers in order to preserve the environment and protect the Kariba Dam and other investments that they want to put in place from environmental degradation and climate change. So I think it comes down to how we package the message and how we approach them. there's value in letting them see the long-term benefits of them investing in these smallholder farmers so that they can be the frontline soldiers or the frontline implementers of water and land land and water resources management. So yeah, I think that's how I would frame it. Yeah.
Thank you. What hinders do you currently see to investors? Why? I mean, everything that was presented here is so convincing. It should be, I mean, benefits to the people, benefits along the value chain, benefits to the planet, benefits to local infrastructure. What's hindering? I heard that investors still see a risk compared to large-scale irrigation. Any words on that one? And then I give the word also to Mitch.
I think it comes down to perception. Perception. How the investors perceive rain-fed agriculture. I mean, everyone loves the grand infrastructure, you know, your dams, the large-scale irrigation infrastructure. But in terms of impact and the amount of money that is put on the ground, I think rain-fed agriculture, if properly properly implemented, the financing mechanism that is, it has more accrued benefits compared to large-scale infrastructure. So I think it comes down to convincing the investors and also getting the necessary people on board, packaging the message well, and then making sure that everyone understands the long-term benefits of small-scale interventions. And as a commission, as ZAMCOM, this is something that we are looking at as well. As I mentioned, we have our strategic action plan, and we are also working with CIF to develop nature-based solutions investments. So investing in nature-based solutions, using the communities and their indigenous knowledge, the local knowledge, to put in place projects that will have long-term benefits. In other words, investing in communities and using or utilizing local solutions in order to solve the local problems. Yeah.
Margani, so I just take a picture out of your presentation. I see now that the establishment costs, the investments needed, are very, very similar to conventional farming. And when I see the benefits, it's really surprising that not more investments into enhanced rainfed agriculture happened. Mitchell, you.
I know, I'm sorry, I'm very impatient, sorry. So, okay, there's two things. First of all, I think that in the private sector and in the donor world, they might not understand rain-fed agriculture. So what is like rain-fed? That sounds very risky, of course, and it's like if there's a drought and then you're talking about rain-fed agriculture, it doesn't kind of make sense. So what I think the message has to be more on the solutions of how to do like the deep bed farming in Malawi with Tiani. This is their nature-based solution. So I think we get hung up on these buzzwords like nature-based solutions, rain-fed ag, like they just get buzzed around, but the reality is what are the solutions? So if you talk about the methodology around how to keep the moisture in the soil, and then that requires funding X. So we need X amount to be able to have these training sessions for Tiani to do their great work in Malawi. And then the other part of that is on the private sector side, I think they're like, okay, this capacity building, policy, all of this stuff, where does that lead to? Is this going to be dropped off the planet like after 3 years of funding, then everyone's going to be at square one again? What happens after that? People want to see that their money is being used to a great effect, that it's going to then be sustainable, the true sense of sustainability. In other words, that people are getting paid, they're making money, and they continue to make money in job creation. It goes on, not just after the program is funded for 2 or 3 years. This is life. It needs to continually happen. So I think
but we also see that the yields are improving. So even after initial funding, you would even have convincing arguments to the farmers to continue.
It's a continuing argument.
I learned from TIARA, the soil, after a few years of use, is hard like concrete. And there, one of the thresholds is to actually to make these beds, which then retain the water. That's a lot of manual labor, which many farmers don't want to invest. And now there are solutions where actually mechanical devices, tractors are brought in. Gerald, do you want to say a few words more about your nodding?
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity, you know. I see it as an opportunity. One of the major challenges, I'm from Zimbabwe, where Fumvudza or Intwasa was carried out. One of the major challenges that the farmers were facing was the use of manual labor. So it's in as much as it's a challenge, it's also an opportunity for innovation. I believe by mechanizing rain-fed agriculture, we will have more benefits and more farmers will adopt it. So I think in as much as we must invest in the farmers, we also have to invest in innovation in order for the farmers to be able to carry out their work in a more efficient way. So instead of it being a challenge, I think it has to be seen as an opportunity for innovation. Yeah.
So when we talk about those investors that still see a huge risk in rainfed agriculture, like Mitchell said, they don't really understand it. Is it only rainfed, or are there also elements of irrigation that reduce the risks? Yeah. Gerald, or
you can take it first.
Yeah, Aganistu, you can.
So I think when I was pointing out in terms of like the risk question, I think I'll concur with Gerard that there's a need of transformation in terms of like how both rain-fed is perceived and what systems or practices are being done, and like bringing in like more innovation sort of like can transform both like the world views and visions about it, but also beyond that there's still a need of showing evidence as to what are these innovations bringing, like what are the benefits or what are the spillover effect, like what Freddie was also mentioning about the biochar. Like if there are frameworks that show the quantitative values, like okay, when you use biochar, this is the amount of like carbon you sequestrate, or this is the amount of soil moisture that you keep. I think those bring like more evidence to sort of like to support. And I think if someone knows that okay, if you implement these practices, you have this progression period of having soil moisture in the ground, even if there's dry spell, then the question of risk, like okay, if there's a dry spell, then there's a risk that you lose crop will not be in any existence. So I see that component in terms of like of discussion. Of course, my talk is more around like giving the evidence from the biophysical part of it. I think the finance, you are much better and talk about that part. Yeah.
So you have the rain-fed irrigation continuum there, where you really have so small irrigation also in times of drought. But that brings me to a question to Nancy. You being there now on site, online now. We heard there's a terrible drought. When we talk about resilience and resistance to these events, can you tell us a bit more? Is it really that those farmers that have changed to enhanced rainfed agriculture, that they are slightly better off now? Does it really provide resilience?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So I think with this, what we do is we try to look at what we call a bundled services approach, right? So in terms of supporting farmers that are doing rain-fed agriculture to have access to different inputs, different services that can help them to become more resilient. So I'll give you an example of, if you say, for example, insurance, right? So in the event that there's a drought, then the farmer is then able to recover at least some of the funding or the money that they would have gotten by the payout that they would have gotten from insurance. I think another thing that we also look at is, for example, soil testing facilities. So understanding the health of the soil so that farmers are able to then, to say, for example, there's a drought that's coming, or, certain incidences are coming related to climate change. How do we then adjust the soil to be able to be more resilient in the case that we are not putting anything? So we also then support in terms of fertilizer recommendations, when to put them and at what point. Another key thing that's also been important is access to information. So actually knowing that, for example, this is when you should plant, so advising them on different planting dates. I'll give an example of in Malawi, as an example, in the soy season has now been shifted, I think, by a month or so. So previously, farmers knew that we planted this particular month, but because of rain coming late, we then inform farmers to say, okay, this is when you actually should be planting, and that then makes the difference between a successful yield and a yield that a crop that might not have yielded as much. I think another instance that we're also trying to look into, or that we've been also going into now, is what we call diversification. So if one crop, if you're doing a monocropping, so if you're doing soy, for example, how do you diversify into other crops in such a way that if this particular primary crop doesn't do as well, you still have another crop to fall back on. So I think those are some of the innovations and some of the services we've been offering to farmers to help them become resilient as they're still, relying on rain-fed agriculture, which is the patterns are shifting over time.
Thank you, Nancy. Then just a follow-up question on that. The farmers that you're talking about, they are probably not only supporting their sustainable, sort of that they have food for their family, but they're also selling their products. So we have been spoken about investors from the donor community that could provide. We heard from Freddie and others that there are also those companies and others that are interested in reducing their carbon. We heard from Gerald about investors from the infrastructure, but what about the value chain, the buyers of products? Maybe Freddie, you could also then come in on, do they support this? Because I mean, when I'm a buyer and I want to buy cotton, for example, then I want to have a stable supply, sort of that it really comes. And are they supporting maybe financially? First, Nancy, and then maybe Freddie comes in as well.
Okay, thank you. So I think, as you've indicated, one of the challenges why private sector entities, in some instances, depending on the commodity, so it could be cotton, fruits and vegetables, as an example, why they're sometimes reluctant to then source from smallholder farmers is the inconsistency in supply. So what we then support with is aggregation. So we either work with existing cooperatives where farmers are members of cooperatives, or we then sort of support them to form a cluster or a cooperative where the product is then aggregated and then sent to the private sector entity. So in this particular case, it then means that where one is defaulting, as an example, or cannot then be able to contribute, there's other farmers that are able to fill in that gap. So by the time it gets to the supplier, and this is mainly in the case of fruits and vegetables, it's still that consistent supply that we would have agreed on, or that consistent supply that they're looking for. In terms of investment, so for investment for them to do the production of these crops, we do have some farmers that are on a contract basis. So give an example of cotton, give an example of tea, where they're then supported to, they're given the inputs to then grow this particular crop, and then the ginners or the estates then recover or get this product from them, and then they then give them the balance. So they then deduct the amount for the inputs. So they don't actually give them the physical cash per se, but they then support them with the inputs. The products are then grown and then sent to that organization, and then the farmer gets the difference as the income that they generate. I think another example, which is not again actual financial cash that's then supported or given to the farmers, is in the soy sector, where we are saying, or what we've noticed is that farmers having access to finance is a challenge, because number one, in terms of the requirements that the formal financial systems give, sometimes the smallholder farmers can't meet it. But what we went further to say is, what are some of the reasons or the uses for the finance that farmers have or that farmers want? And one of them is to buy inputs. And so in the soy sector, we work with private sector organizations where they get 50%. So it's like a loan basis. They get 50% of the soy seed on credit. They pay 50% upfront. And then when they have then harvested, they can either pay back the cash or the amount that they owe, the 50%, or they can pay it back in kind, which is then the seed that would have been produced. So that's another way to support them in terms of having access to the inputs that they require without necessarily then giving them the actual finance itself, but understanding what they need the finance for and then supporting in that regard.
Thank you. Freddie, you want to come in when it comes to that even the buyers of the product have a more stable supply due to the methods?
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, if you're a brand or a H&M, for example, like they purchase hundreds of thousands of tons of cotton every year. They want to ensure that there is a stable price in cotton. However, when you have a drought and there is a shortage of supply, what happens is that there is an increase. If you have a shortage of supply, the price is going to go up, just due to supply and demand. So it really makes sense for the likes of these big brands to be investing in their own supply chain, to increase the resilience of the crops, of the farmers' livelihoods. And there's something called a carbon inset, which sort of brings this together. So we've heard of carbon offsets, carbon credits, where you're offsetting an emission from your own business to a separate project. With a carbon inset, you're investing in your own value chain to inset CO2 into your own value chain. And yeah, biochar fortunately provides this as a really good solution for the likes of these brands where they need that commodity to be stable so that they can purchase it, because then it trickles downstream into their factories, into their clothing stores. We have an example in Ghana where we're working with a Japanese cacao trader. So they've seen that the risks of not investing in their farms leads to this shortage of supply of cacao. So they are acting actually as the project developer on the ground. They're doing the farm outreach because they already have this network of farmers. So they're going out, teaching them how to use the technology, teaching them how to produce biochar, investing the carbon back into the soil within their farm, within their supply chain at the primary source, so that then they have a consistent supply of cacao and also carbon removal credits, which offsets or inset, the emissions that are attributed to that chocolate product as it reaches the end consumer. So what you end up with really is a product that is stable because your supply is consistent, because it's less impacted by climate change, but you're also left with a carbon neutral or carbon negative product because your emissions generated from the product's creation are invested into the supply chain at the point source. So it becomes literally like a net zero world if we can do this with more agricultural commodities, whether it's sugar, rubber that goes into shoes or car tires. There's so much potential to negate so much emissions from the world by investing carbon insets, whilst also increasing stability in the commodity itself, in the price of this commodity. Because I think we're all aware that the increase of climate change, the likelihood of climate change, will lead to these spikes in prices. The cost of goods will increase when there is a shortage of supply. So it really is such a win-win. It makes so much sense to package this for the brands and for the corporates that actually rely on these supply chains. Because at the end of the day, it's going to cost them if they don't. So, yeah, it makes more sense.
Thank you very much, Freddie. Yeah, well, we are coming to the end of our panel discussion. We heard it's worth investing. We heard also about the challenges of attracting these investors. I must say, if there was a stock market for rainfed agriculture, I would now start buying stocks there. This is really very interesting. But maybe one or two last sentences. What's most important now for the near future regarding attracting investments? Starting online, I don't know, Pami or Nancy, you want to speak for Solidaridad? You're muted, Nancy.
Well, okay, thank you so much. Hello?
Yes,
so
we hear you.
Can still hear you.
Yeah,
okay.
we can hear you.
So I think what I would say to respond to your question in terms of what's important for the investment world to sort of understand in terms of rainfed agriculture, I think if we are to address a lot of the food security issues, if we are to address a lot of the livelihoods issues, at least within the development space, it's difficult. It's going to be very difficult to ignore rainfed agriculture, because I think some of the solutions around mechanization, some of the, the irrigations and so on, that's not going to be, at least in the short term, that's not going to be possible to get everybody under those particular systems. So I think as we are then transitioning to that, something needs to happen in the meantime. And what I would say is I think the investors need to maybe spend a bit more time understanding the dynamics within the rain-fed agriculture systems, but also then a co-creation process in terms of what addressing that could look like, so that they understand that, the risk. Yes, we do understand that they see risk in it, but then they then understand how best we can work together to address some of these issues with very limited risk.
Thank you. Freddie, 2 last sentences on what's now needed in the near future to attract investments.
First of all, I think like collaboration and partnerships, like it's such a mammoth global challenge and opportunity that we're trying to address. And I think ourselves working with the likes of Solidaridad, like it really requires a coming together to make these solutions actionable. Like it's such a massive outreach program that's required. Like there's 800 million people like living on less than $2 a day, typically in regions where there is very little water, and rain-fed agriculture is, and there's subsistence farming, and rain-fed agriculture is so necessary. So like to have the boots on the ground and the networks and the solutions distributed, it really requires like massive partnerships and a togetherness. But then separate to that, just a genuine like realization of how little time we have to take action. We can keep talking about, it's been spoken of for years. We know climate change is inevitable. So hesitating and stalling and delaying or discussing, or it really can be frustrating. And I think that there needs to be like just some sort of sense of like reality and literally like a rain check on this, to pardon the pun, just so that things actually happen and people step forward, because it needs to happen. Otherwise we're just going to be kicking around in the dust if we don't.
Thank you. Mitchell.
Thank you, Stefan. Yes, I would like to echo Freddie, of course. I think collaboration is super important. I think it's the most important thing, because a lot of money is spent on research and a lot of money is spent on development projects and organizations. Share the knowledge, reach out to private sector and share that knowledge. Thank you, Meganiso. He did an amazing job. And I think the metrics are needed because these help with facilitating the funding. And I just want to keep on echoing that same thing because it's super important. Share the knowledge and reach out to other partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Gerald, you spoke about political will, about investments. What will be done in the next 3-4 years now? What should be done?
Yeah, I think it comes down to how we're going to package the message, change the perceptions and perspectives out there. Like Mitchell said, the moment people hear rain-fed agriculture, risk, there are certain negative perceptions associated with it. So I think in order for us to drive the point home, we have to package the message in a manner that makes it palatable, especially to the private sector and other entities and players who can avail money and resources for us to invest into rain-fed agriculture. At the end of the day, it comes down to the people. Whatever we're doing, all this work that we're doing, the people, the communities that live in the basin and the local people there, they have to benefit in the long run. So I think how we package the message, how we approach our approach to the whole thing, I think that's what we need to do. That's the next point, the next way forward.
Oh.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
Definitely.
Advocating for the cause. And then probably the last few words would be what evidence is needed and where would you come in? What's your next things that you should, where do you see the gaps in the evidence?
I'll answer the question in a different way. I think. When you ask a musician if they are good enough or not good enough, they say let the music do the talking. So what I would say is that I think what everyone has shared are really critical across the whole value chain, from production to selling and even to having access to every angle. But the key thing is that there should be action. Let the action start and let the enhanced rain-fed agriculture speak for itself.
Thank you very much, and thank you for attending the session. We also have prepared a form for you to maybe we do that afterwards, and we will also share the results of this Mentimeter audience questions on the web page. Otherwise, just reach out to us. Thank you very much for listening, for your attention, and yeah, rainfed agriculture invests in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you guys.
Thank you.